Think if you were a 16-year-old who just returned home from an exhausting yet exhilarating mission experience. You spend a week serving. You were sharing your faith, sharing your testimony, building relationships with your own team and those that you were serving. And you were witnessing God at work. You came home, you were inspired, you were energized, and hopefully even changed. But now you're back to life as it normally is. School is just around the corner. Routines have already returned. And the question now becomes for that 16-year-old, what happens next? Well, today we are diving into one of the most overlooked parts of a summer missions trip, and that is the follow-up. We are looking at how students can move from a mission trip experience to becoming missionally minded in their lifestyle, going from doing missions to being on mission, bridging the mission experience back into everyday life. Well, hey, friend, this is Rich Brown, and welcome to the NextGen Matters podcast, a show for ministry leaders seeking to move beyond overwhelm and move into leading with clarity, confidence, and consistency. I realize right now that many of you, as we're recording this in the month of July 2026, many of you have already possibly done your mission trips, or you're just beginning to do your mission trips as school is literally around the corner. Whether you're listening to this now in the summer or later on, I want you to be thinking how you could take these principles and put them into play. If it's not even for this trip, for a coming trip. So let's get started. To best facilitate excellent follow-through and bridge building, we're going to be creating a 5-pillar framework that our bridge is based on. Because today we are talking about bringing it home, bridging the mission experience into everyday life. These 5 pillars are as follows: the home, the local church, the student ministry, the student, and the host site. So as we walk through these 5 pillars of this bridge, I want you to think what you can adapt or just adopt, or even come up with more creative ideas on your own. We're going to walk through these rather quickly, but I want you to be thinking right now, before we get into the 5 pillars, I have my cup of coffee. Oh yeah. It's Pike's Market, by the way. And you got yours? Because just pretend for a moment, you and I are seated at a coffee shop, at a table, and I got some questions. I love Pike's Market. Here's my first question, my friend. Why does the return home often feel so difficult? Now, as a leader, I don't know about you, but I'm going to be honest. I was ready to get home. I'm a home dude. I'm a home boy, all right? If my wife wasn't with me, I'm missing my wife and my kids. But in my ministry days, they were all with me. But I'm saying, yeah, sometimes as adults, we're ready to get home. But for that student, sometimes that return trip is very difficult. And that's what I would ask you right now. Why does the return home often feel so difficult? Another question for you. Is there a difference between a mission trip experience and everyday life? I think we all know the answer to that. Absolutely. I mean, I'm already thinking of Jesus with 3 of his apostles, the inner circle, Peter, James, and John, on the Mount of Transfiguration. And when they came down, they went from the mountaintop experience to everyday life. They got hit up right away with complaining parents. Yeah, read it in the book of Matthew. Literally, a complaining dad. And that's a lot of times what happens to our students. They go from this incredible time of serving and being with their friends and growing as a team, and they go back to maybe, and ideally, and Lord willing, great homes, but some go back to very toxic homes. And life hits them really hard and fast right in their face. Another question. Is there a typical emotional and spiritual letdown that students typically experience? Again, I would say, yeah, there probably is. So we're going to build a bridge. We're going to take this bridge from the mission experience into everyday life. Here's the first one, their home. What can we as ministry leaders do to help our students engage with their families upon their return back home? Well, I have a few thoughts, and here they are. There's three of them. First of all, is help parents guide the conversation. Ideally, they're going back into a believing home, but I also know statistically many of our students don't. In either case, let's reach out, building the bridge to the parents. The heavy lifting is done to a trip before the trip, not after. So, what I'm going to say now really needs to be set in motion before the trip, building that bridge to the parents, especially in relationship to this trip. But let's help guide the parents in their conversations when that student returns home. So here's what I'm thinking, a few thoughts, some bullet points, if you will. What about providing a reflection guide? Talking about your trip and what God had done, and then you send that off to the parents. Within that first week, ideally, you could already have it pre-packaged before you leave the trip and then have it sent to them during the week. So when y'all get home, they've got it in their inbox. Provide a reflection guide. Another is an idea of sending an email. Let's call it a what God started email. Again, letting these parents know the really amazing things that God did through your team, but tailor it even to what God did in their own student, their own child. Now, what I'm going to suggest you do is it doesn't take a budget. It's free. It's just called a relationship. Personally, come on, personally touch base with each parent. I realize some of you may be in mega churches, you take 200 students on a trip, but that's not most of us. I took 25 high schoolers back in my days out in Seattle. Okay. I have enough leverage and enough relationship with parents of 25 students that I could connect with them, including the parents of the unsaved, the student who's in an unsaved home. Yes, personally touch base with each parent. Text them. You can also simply eye-to-eye conversation, hand on their shoulder, thanking them for letting their child go and giving one or two major props about how proud you are of their child and how proud they should be of their own child. That takes no budget, but that goes a million miles. So yeah, in the home, helping parents guide the conversation. See, this equips parents with questions. You also create the idea of encouragement and practical ways how they can help their student transition from that emotional mountaintop, just like the three apostles had, into everyday life and having a heart of faithfulness. Second is creating meaningful family moments. Creating meaningful family moments. Even during the trip, have that student write home during the trip. They give you the letter, you've got the envelope, they've already put their address on it. You just put the stamp on it. And literally, if you're in a situation, unless you're in the mountains of Peru, okay, but if you're in a situation where you could mail that out, I'd say mail that out. If you're getting home, for example, on a Saturday, mail it out on a Wednesday. So that parent is getting that typically on a Friday, maybe the day they get home on a Saturday. Ideally, the parents are getting that letter before their son or daughter comes home. Encourage and coach your student to be writing letters of gratitude and also personal growth, thanking their parents for letting them come and having them share with their parents the good things God's been doing in their life and through their life. Another bullet point, if you will, is encouraging the student to have their families be praying to God for him to continue the work that God had started doing in the people that they served. In other words, when they get home and they're then sharing these things that God has done in that mission site, asking their family members, their siblings, their parents to join them in praying over those people, those names. If they had iPhones with them, the pictures on their phones or the pictures you gave them, where the family could actually see the people that their child was serving and say, Mom and Dad, we need to pray for so-and-so. Have their families join in prayer. All right. Also, I would encourage you to have your students take let's say a show and tell night. Share one story or one, even like an object, or create like an object lesson from the trip and actually have the student be sharing with their family one major, let me say, God story of his faithfulness, of what he did in and through them. You see, these moments will help the students feel seen, supported, and spiritually anchored where it matters most, and that's their home. Now, before I go to the next one, a local church, there's a third point here under home, and that is building a home rhythm for growth. Building a home rhythm for growth. Here's what I mean. Giving the students tools that keeps their heart aligned after the trip. For example, having them serve at home, give them like a challenge. Before you leave, your debrief time, before you leave, say, hey, what is one thing you can do to be intentional when you get home to serve your family better? Not, oh, I'm going to help mom around the house. No, have them be very specific. Nail it down, very tactical and practical. Have them nail it down. What are they going to do during that first week to be serving their family? They're serving these people overseas or in a different state or a different part of your own state, but helping them learn to serve at home. Also then, to the parents, equipping parents with you ready? A weekly conversation question. Yeah, create a weekly conversation question. Like, for example, one intentional question each week for the next 4 weeks, right? That helps families talk about missions, global, local, regional, that talks about being gospel focused and also serving others. So if you can give parents these weekly conversational questions, you really set the parents up to do this very, very well as far as connecting the child, the student, back into their family and helping their family feel like they were truly partners with you on this trip. That's the home. The second major pillar is the local church. Some of this we probably already do. I'm not sure if we do the home thing well, to be honest, but I think a lot of times we lean into this one well, and that is the local church. Here, got a few thoughts. First of all, celebrating the story publicly. Right. You get them up in front of the church and they get to share. If your lead lets you do that, it's amazing. I was blessed my last couple of churches I served in that they actually said, here, take the service, let's go. And we knew that in advance, and we had the students ready to share the good things God had done through them. So sharing testimonies, creating a highlight video, maybe out in the lobby. Maybe you can't do the service, but ask if you can at least get the lobby, to have a photo display, having students back there. Maybe your lead pastor or executive team, whoever does those like announcements, etc., can say, hey, our team's in the back, even have refreshments, if you will. Meet our team, do something to connect the stories the students had with the body of Jesus in your local church. This helps your congregation both see and feel the impact of the mission trip. Also, prayer. So invite the church into prayer. Yes, prayer cards before you go, before and during the trip, highly intentional points of prayer requests for the trip. But I'm also going to suggest another prayer request option, and that's post-trip. We're talking about after the trip, so here we are. Then have your team, you ready? Prepare cards for a continued prayer for your church to be praying for what was done for God to continue to do for the next 30 days. So have a 30-day prayer challenge to the church, okay? This is how you can continue begging God to do his work in these people's lives. Your students, in many cases, were just seed dropping. They were plowing up the soil and putting down the seed, and God's got to give the increase. And when they left, that work is not done. Come on. That work could just really be started. Praying for those missionaries you partnered with, praying for that local church that you were serving alongside, praying for those people that you served, getting the church, your church, to pray over it for the next 30 days. And then also the third point under local church is strengthen. I love this one. And I did this a ton out in Seattle. Strengthen intergenerational connection. Bridge your students to your church leadership and vice versa. So, for example, encourage various students to connect with if you have Sunday school classes, or maybe it's life groups, community groups, etc. Do what you can to send various students, obviously with permission from the teachers of that class, but ask in advance if we could have students come into these adult settings and have them in a very low-key relational way sharing what God did. That's amazing. You could have 25 to 30 some adults hearing from a 16-year-old what God had done in her or his life, and even having questions going back and forth. That would be so powerful, to be connecting the silos of our church and stop having just pure silos and have synergy. Another thought on intergenerational connection. Invite your pastors and your church leadership, deacon board, elder board, to join your students in a team time of debriefing with the students themselves. Wouldn't that be so wild? Yeah, sometimes your lead pastor hears it from you, I hope, but to get that individual, the other pastors, elder team or deacon team, whoever, getting the adults who really steer the ship to your church, to get them to join with the students and have the students share with them. That is an incredible time of bridge building, intergenerational connections from your students to your church. And then the last bullet point under number 3 of strengthen intergenerational connections is this: have the team create gratitude moments, appreciation notes, gift cards, etc. for the adults who, you ready, went on the trip. Maybe they didn't go, but they worked toward the trip. Maybe there was fundraisers a lot of people did behind the scenes to help the students along. People maybe donated. Don't be the 9 lepers that were healed that felt entitled. The gospel says that they were Jewish, and the one who was a Samaritan, he's the one that came back and said, "Thank you, Jesus." So let's not be like those 9 entitled, like they felt like they were owed because they were of the same, let's say, air quotes, faith of Jesus. They were Jewish. But that Samaritan, he felt so grateful. Let's have the heart of that Samaritan of that story when Jesus healed the 10 lepers. Let's make sure we dial back, we circle back, and we connect with those who helped make this possible for our students. Help them to see that. What you're doing here in this second part of being church connected is you're reinforcing that the mission trip is a church-wide investment, not just a student ministry investment. And all God's people said, come on, right? Now, we have the family, we have the church. What about the team, the student ministry team? Let's walk through this one. Process the trip together. Yes, I'm a big fan, and I did it many years, where the last night we had our debrief time. And I would take time to read in Luke's Gospel, chapter 10, verses 17 through 20. I'm going to do it right now. Now, if you're driving, you're good. Don't close your eyes. I got you, okay? But here's verses 17 through 20 that Jesus spoke when the 72 came back from their, air quotes, you ready? Mission trip. The 72 returned with joy, and they said, "Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name." Jesus replies, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions, to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you." Verse 20 I have underlined in my Bible. "However, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." Then I would stop. We're all sitting in a circle later that evening. I'd read that passage and go, what was that all about? Why did Jesus drop that on them? Let's walk through this. And it'd be quiet. And it was quiet for a long time. And then finally some thoughts are being shared. And I'm listening. And I won't take that long because this is a podcast, so I'll keep moving. But what I shared with them was basically this. What Jesus is correcting in that teaching of Satan falling from the sky is this. The 72 came back thrilled. Of course they did. I mean, they're saying, demons jumping out of windows kind of thing. And Jesus affirms that their experience, yes, was true. God did use you in supernatural ways. But he immediately warned them not to anchor their joy, you ready, in spiritual victories, because that can lead to pride. And why did Satan fall? The original sin, pride. That's the very sin that toppled Satan from being basically the worship leader of heaven into becoming the fallen angel Lucifer, the devil. So that's what Jesus is correcting. He said, watch your pride, y'all. Then what he's teaching is this. Ministry success is temporary, but salvation is eternal. because Christ says, your names are written in the book of life in heaven. It's cool. He uses that Greek perfect tense. It means a complete action with ongoing results. My identity in Christ is secure. I rejoice not just because God did cool God things, but I rejoice because I am a sinner saved by grace. And my identity is now in Jesus. My joy must be rooted in grace, not performance. Let me say that one again. Your joy must be rooted in grace and not performance. So Jesus commands them to rejoice in what God has done for them, not what they did for God. I'll let that sit. So why this matters for you and I as spiritual leaders today as we disciple these students? Leaning into this with them hearing this, power can puff you up. That was my last podcast, last episode, episode 27. Power can puff you up. King Uzziah got cocky, got humble. You can't tell me, priest, what I can do and can't do. I'm going to do it anyway. Walk into that temple. I'm going to drop that holy fire. They said, no, you're not. Boom, he gets leprosy. Power can puff up, but grace humbles. Another thought is visible fruit comes and goes. I mean, you know this, you're in ministry. Sometimes we have winning streaks and sometimes it seems like losing streaks. Visible fruit comes and goes, but eternal life, thank you, Jesus, does not fade. And identity precedes activity. Another thought there. A couple more quick bullet points under this why it matters for us as spiritual leaders. Joy rooted in salvation will always, joy rooted in results. Joy rooted in results will always be fragile. But joy rooted in salvation is unshakable. I need to clean that up. I'll say it again. Joy rooted in results will always be fragile, but joy rooted in salvation is unshakable. So here's what Jesus is saying. All right, guys. Yeah, you had the power of God. You have the power of God. God did use you. He'll still use you. But don't put your identity in that. You are a son of the Most High God. Rejoice that your name is in the book of life. Stay humble, my friend. Stay humble. Now, I want you to think about this. As you've already hosted that debrief night at the last week of the mission trip. Now, what do we do when we get back with our team? How about this? Meet 1 week later and have them share from their growth journals. Now, I didn't say that earlier in this episode, but let's just say during the week, you have them taking notes, if you will, every night. They had time of reflection. Build that into your schedule. Have an evening time where you give them 15 minutes, a block of 15 minutes to go off by themselves and journal the things that God has done, and even create sometimes some prayer requests in that journal. 1 week after the trip, you meet again and have them share in their journals. They now have had time to, let's say, think through and process the overwhelming of everything that just took place. It's like when you go to a conference and you're overwhelmed and someone says, what'd you learn? You go, everything. I got fire hosed, and give me a few days, I'll get back with you. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So a week later, have them bring their journals, have them walk through it with you. Have themselves, I would do this at camp as well, but have themselves write a letter of reflection, give it to you, and you mail it out to them a month later. Have them write themselves a letter of reflection. Now, not the same day they write their parents. That's like middle of the experience. But this would be at the end of the week. The end of the week. Have them write themselves a letter of reflection, and then you mail it out to them 1 month from now. 1 month from when you return home. You see, those moments are helping students grow. They're celebrating their wins. They're reconnecting relationally with one another. We're not trying to live in the past. We're moving forward, but we're rejoicing in the past as we move forward. Second big thing I want to point out with the student ministry is just not the team, but help the team understand that we are one student ministry. We all know there are some students that don't go on our trips. I had half of my high school students go, half didn't. The half that didn't go, it wasn't all because they were anti-spiritual. A lot of them, it was like family obligations. They had trips that week. They were going on vacay. They had something going on and they just couldn't go and they wanted to go. I'm not going to relationally punish them because they couldn't be on the trip. What I'm getting is I don't want to set it up like the haves and have-nots. Some students just weren't spiritually there yet. And I respected that. And actually, I preferred that. So yeah, everyone isn't going to go on your ministry team, in your student ministry on the mission trip. But I want the students on the mission trip to realize, don't become divided. Don't become proud. Don't think we are better than. Do everything in your power to help them understand when we get home, here's the deal. We're going to reach out to the rest of our youth ministry back home. And yeah, we're going to have our enthusiasm about the trip, but make sure they're communicating humility and not some kind of elitist attitude to the rest of the group. We are one body. Because what happens, yeah, you create this like little mini culture and you got the inside jokes and that's fine, but you catch what I'm saying, right? If you're on the outside, that's not going to help. That's not going to help. So we got to do everything we can to make sure everyone is feeling like we are one body. Now, here's another way you can help with this. It's as follows. Think missional and not ministry trip. So think missional and not ministry trip. I want to encourage you to have your students be thinking, let's take and translate what we did on the trip into everyday life. So, a few thoughts on how that can be done. Create a student-led service project within 1 to 2 months of your return. Create a student-led service project. I'm a fan of, and I did this, our students, we created a student leadership team and they ran the mission. My wife and I went, we basically were hands-off coaches because my hands-on was 3 months of training, but the hands came off. I let them, I'm still guiding the ship, y'all, okay? But I let them process and work and everything they put together in planning, they then executed. You've already got leadership now within these students. Have them now develop a service project, which is also incorporating the students who didn't go on the trip. Make sense? So I want to have the student ministry team that went, the student mission team that went, we're already thinking through what major project could we do at home that also incorporates those that didn't go. And then put those students in various leadership roles on that service project. Keep reminding them real ministry is right here at home, and it's right here in our church. It's right here on your campus. It is here. I used to tell them during the week of our mission experience that real success of our trip is not going to be seen this week. Real success is going to be seen 2 months from now when you're back in school. Did everything you had, that bravado, that courage, that strength, translate into your high school campus? That's what I wanted to see. Another thought here on the student ministry team is the student ministry, is keeping global awareness visible. So making the mission trip part of your ministry culture. For example, create a prayer wall or create a map. Highlight global needs and answer prayer regularly. Keeping your students connected to the people and the places where they served. And I'm going to tap into more of that in the last of the 5. Here's number 4, the individual student. Number 3 was the student ministry team. This is now the individual student who went. Number 1, invest personally in each student. Write personal notes to every one of your students who went. Write, not text. There's something powerful about the pen to paper because it takes time. Write a personal note to each one of your students. And I'd say that first week, make sure it's sent out to them. Mail it to them. Maybe it's a postcard. I like postcards because then parents can see it. Not to make it braggadocious, but then the parents can become aware of what's going on, thinking, thank you for reaching out to my kid. Because normally a student's not going to say, hey, mom, hey, dad, Pastor Rich, no, they wouldn't say that. So maybe it's a postcard. Whatever, just reach out to them. A personal note. Also, I'm a big fan of this, and I did it. Have one-on-ones with those key students. If it's a leadership team or it's everybody, do a one-on-one. I did one-on-ones before the trip, and I had them set down personal goals, and then you do a debrief. And I did this because we had camp 2 weeks later. So at camp, I had that time with our missions team because they were there at camp. So during camp, while we had one-on-ones that every camper was doing with other students, I focused in on our mission team to follow up on missions. Then ask your students, hey, what's next? What's God doing in your heart now? What do you see God doing next? What you're doing is you're affirming what God did in them, and you're helping them discern their next step in serving, their next step in leading and mentoring, even future ministry themselves. So first one, again, invest personally in each student. Second one, for each individual student, guide their spiritual growth. So for example, a couple thoughts here. Create a personal growth plan. Create a 30-day, let's say, spiritual habit growth plan. 30-day growth plan. You could also do this. Have a mission mindset check-in. For example, asking them, maybe you could text them on this or, one-on-one with them later and say, hey, how are things going? Because they set goals. I want to become more active in sharing my faith in school. Well, then keep following up with that. Mission mindset, mission mindset, mission mindset. I want to check in. So what we're doing, we're turning the mission trip momentum into long-term discipleship. That was number 2, guide their spiritual growth. Number 3, strengthen peer encouragement. So help students build each other up. It's powerful to you lean in and to encourage, but I love what Hebrews says in so many other scriptures of the one another's. Hebrews speaks so much in chapter 3 and chapter 10 both on how we should be edifying, exhorting one another every day. So get peer encouragement challenges. Encourage your students to be challenging each other, to be encouraging each other. Because we had it set up where they actually had, I call them D teams, discipleship teams. We had D teams where they had these, accountability teams and these discipleship teams within the big team. You could just keep that same system going. Another way you can help them build up is encourage them to celebrate what they are seeing God do in each other's lives. Again, this is a way they can now help one another. When you see something, say something in the good way. Getting them to realize, just like we gave each other props during the week, keep giving each other props from now on. That reinforces community, belonging, and shared spiritual growth. Hey, during the trip, we actually had, I called it a Barnabas board, Barnabas, son of encouragement, right? So we had this massive sheet of paper, that big butcher paper, with permission from our host site. We would put that sticky substance. We put it on the big, the wall, right? So they could write on it with a marker, again, being cool that it's not going through on the wall, but we'd have that big butcher paper and we called it the Barnabas board. Students anonymously would go up throughout the week and they would make sure they're given props. They're saying a shout out. They're writing down something they saw in a student that was really cool. I stepped back and I watched, so did my adult leaders. And if somebody seemed to get a little heavy, like someone's getting all the love, but these 3 students aren't getting any love, we kind of make sure we'd even the score a little bit. But what was cool is I didn't have to always do that. I realized the students who walked by that Barnabas board, all of a sudden they were adjusting the scoreboard. In other words, you saw everyone getting the love. That was done during the week. Well, make that a mindset. You maybe do that in your youth room. Number 5. The host site. The host site. So first of all, express gratitude to them, meaningfully gratitude. So strengthen that partnership by honoring the people who hosted your team. You have to realize, I've talked to the missionaries. It is a strain on them if they're hosting you. It is a strain on them. I mean, would you like to have 20 students come into your church that you don't even know who they are, right? And then you got to figure out things for them to do and all that. It's a big ask. So what I'm saying is strengthen partnership by honoring those people that they were the host site. For example, record a thank you video. Have the students genuinely and honestly share gratitude and the impact that host site meant to them. Also, keep in those connections. Reconnect with that ministry or that mission partner, sending encouragement, updates, prayer, etc. Guys, I'm telling you, we did this back in my day. We had a church 3 hours away, Hispanic pastor, Pastor Abner from Managua, Nicaragua. And his heart that God put on his vision, what God put on his heart was to leave Central America and go to Eastern Washington to work with migrant workers. And that's what he did. He started a local Hispanic church. 8 different nations were in that little church of 50 people, mostly Central American nations and even Peru. It was amazing. And plus, by the way, y'all, they fed us one night real, genuine Hispanic food from all the different flavors from all the different nations. Our students were like jacked. They were like, I remember Parker, one of our guys going, Rich, this is amazing. This ain't Taco Bell, y'all. It was incredible. I told our team on the way going into this, Pastor Abner, he's going to put his pastor hat on. Think of it like this. Right now, he's our lead pastor. We are here to serve him. We are part of Vida Nueva Iglesia Church. I said, we are part of their team. We're not walking in as the Americans, even though they live in the States. You know what I'm saying? We're not walking in as those basically Anglo-Americans to help them out. We came in with a servant's heart. That's why I took those 3 months of training to get that in the mindset. And Abner would share his heart and his broken English with tears in his eyes. And I'm looking at my students going, and they're like bawling. They felt him right then. They felt his heart. And that continued on. He had teenagers. His own kids were teenagers. We actually invited them to come over to spend time with us for some of our weekend experiences. That was so cool. We kept the connections going. And guess what? We kept going back year after year. And we kept expanding the vision, what he wanted us to do. So express gratitude. Stay connected through prayer. I've already alluded to it. But ask that host site for some ongoing prayer needs and then pray over it. Also invite your students to pray for even next year's team. Because we had students the first couple of years that didn't go. They're like, okay, I'm going next year. I can't miss next year. I got to go next year. I actually had adults in our church. Hey, Rich, can we come? Is there something we can do? That's awesome, right? I said, yeah, let's go. Let's think of something y'all can do as well. Building ownership, empathy, and a year-round mission mindset. So stay connected through prayer. And then third, clarify ongoing partnership. Again, I've already been alluding to this, right? But explore a long-term partnership plan. Yeah, we would sit down with Pastor Abner and his wife, Nellie, Janet and I would, that last night and say, hey, we've had a great time with y'all. If you would like us to come back next year, this is no pressure on you. You just think through and pray through it. They're like, Miss Nellie looked at us. She had tears in her eyes. She goes, you mean you'd want to come back here? I'm like, yeah. They were like, thank you. Hugs, let's go. We began to develop this great partnership. Now that changed because this guy here, God then took me from the West Coast to Lynchburg, Virginia. So those 4 years were then up for us. But that church is still going on. So what I'm getting at is this is helping mission trips become relationally based, not just events. And the last part under your host site, the connections there, is keeping the story alive. Making sure your students remember that the people and the place where they served matter so much to God, and they matter to us. Share updates from the host site during your youth group times. Highlight answers to prayers that they are seeing God do on their site, and then you share it with them. Keeping that global awareness woven into your ministry culture. All right, call to action, here we are. I don't really have a big call to action because I already gave you a whole bunch to think about. Take those 5 pillars of that bridge, and you don't need 50 ideas. You just need the right ideas. So take those 5 pillars to build a bridge from the mission site back into everyday life. Go from doing missions to being on mission. So when you follow up intentionally at home, in the local church, through your student ministry, with the student, and toward the host site, you're just not celebrating what God did. You're multiplying what God did. Let's bring this to a close. I get fired up on this stuff, y'all. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me on today's NextGen Matter podcast. Remember, if today's ministered to you, email me, rich@nextgenmatters.com. I would love to hear from you. Also, leave a comment in this podcast. Send it to a friend. And if you've not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, to Apple, or to Spotify, please do so. And be so kind to write a review. And if you're not getting the Thursday tool email, please do so. Today's went out earlier today talking about missions. It's not the same thing in this episode. I had other content for today's email and next week's email. I have other content that weren't on this podcast. There's so much to talk about when we're talking about building a bridge, right? So anyway, the link below to get the email is in your show notes. Remember, my friend, your leadership matters because your ministry matters, because the gospel matters. Take care, God bless, and have a fantastic week.